Hello, hi, how are you, Robin? So glad that you hopped on. I'm gonna get started here in a second. Can you hear me okay? Cool, awesome. Well, if you have any questions about trusting your voice, you can type them in the chat box as I go along, and I will answer them then. I'll answer them at the end of the chat. Hi, Nakia. How are you? So glad you joined. Okay, I'm going to wait one more minute. What I was saying is if you have questions throughout, you can just drop them in the chat box and I will respond to them at the end because I have a little spiel that I want to do before I go into live Q&A. Sounds good? Just put thumbs up. Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and get started because I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So thank you for joining me. I'm so excited to talk about what does it mean to trust our voice? What does it mean to reclaim our intuition? And so the first thing I want to start off saying is that when our voice leaves us, it has one of two filters. It's either going to have the filter of love and trust or fear and doubt. How do you know the difference? If it's love and trust, you're going to feel joy, you're going to feel compassion, you're going to feel a sense of peace. If it's leaving us from a lens of fear and doubt, you're going to feel pain, anger, resentment, bitterness. We know what it feels like. I don't have to name all of those emotions. So if you're trying to figure out, am I operating with my voice in love and trust or fear and doubt, the first thing you can do is just to pause and ask yourself, what am I feeling? If you're feeling peace or some sort of joy, that means that your voice is leaving you out of love and trust. So you ask yourself, what am I feeling? And then follow the feeling. If you're feeling pain or some sort of resentment or anger, then you ask yourself, what am I fearing? What am I doubting in the moment? That's going to let you know which way your voice is leaning. The reality is that fear and doubt is a result of us having a deficit and lack mindset. What do I mean by that? That means that we're operating with the belief that when we need something, the universe, the creator, will not provide it for us. When you operate out of love and trust, you're operating out of abundance because you know when you need resource, that resource will be given to you at that particular moment by the universe. So you might ask yourself, how am I going to switch from being fear and doubt to operating in more love and trust? And in order to do that, you have to start to trust your intuition. So I'm going to define intuition because, it's been said and talked about in many different ways. And I feel like we need to get on the same page about what that actually means. When you trust your intuition or when you acknowledge you have an intuition, it is that inner knowing inside. It is that gift, that superpower from the creator. It is that knowing in your spirit. Sometimes you're like, I just have a feeling in my spirit. That is our connection to the spirit world. Our intuition lets us know that there are more in this earth. There's more in this earth than our five senses. That is our connection to the spirit part of ourselves. It is meant to guide us on what to do. And when we experience trusting our intuition, you know what this feels like. When you trust your intuition, you have a peace of mind. You have clarity. You have joy in your life when you're trusting your intuition. You know what it feels like when you don't trust it. You get upset. You get frustrated. You're like, dang, why didn't I trust myself? Right? That distrusting of your intuition gives you the same feelings when you're operating in fear and doubt. You're angry, you're upset, you're frustrated, and you're in resentment. At the heart of not trusting our intuition, if you do the 5 whys, so in the blog that I released today, I talked about one way to get at why you don't trust your intuition is to ask yourself why 5 times. When I coach people, and I use this to get to the heart of a particular problem, especially if it's around trust, the 5th why as to why they're distrusting their voice in a particular area almost always ends up being because they have a fear of rejection, a fear of loss, i.e. like loss of a relationship, loss of an opportunity. They have a fear of being wrong. Okay, that's usually what's at the heart of why we are distrusting it. And so this is causing us to ignore that inner knowing inside of us. In order to actually trust your intuition, you have to be brave. You have to be willing to have that difficult conversation. It means trusting that signal. You have to be willing to, when that inner voice tells you to end the relationship, when that inner voice tells you to leave the partnership, when the inner voice tells you to leave the room, when the inner voice tells you don't accept that business deal. When you trust it and you follow in that leading, you experience that peace of mind. You experience that joy. But when you distrust it, you know that you're going to be frustrated, upset, angry at yourself. And so the key thing I want to talk about next is, how do you know that the voice that you are hearing is your intuition, which is bringing that peace and that joy, or if it's the result of unhealed trauma? Now, it's important for me to talk about unhealed trauma because sometimes unhealed trauma surfaces and we think it's our intuition protecting us and guiding us, and it's really the result of us not resolving pain that we have had in our lives. So how do you know you have unhealed trauma that's guiding your decision making? Well, first off, let me say, unhealed trauma is usually a result of us not processing our emotions on a given situation, and it leaves us unhealed. Okay, there's 3 different ways that we can process our emotions. We can express them, i.e. let them come through us. We can choose to escape, which people do this with drugs, they do it with alcohol, or participate in any other behaviors where you use an external stimulus to numb your feelings. Or the 3rd way is that we suppress or repress our emotions, right? Suppression is a result of, it's a conscious decision not to feel something. So for example, you have a bad day at the office. Rather than processing your feelings, you go get a carton of ice cream, you sit in front of the TV and you eat the ice cream, right? That's an example of you don't want to deal with the emotions, so you're eating to mask it. Repression is on the dangerous end of it, because when you repress something, you don't even allow it into your conscious. You actually don't even, you avoid it. And so oftentimes people who repress emotions, they project, which means they'll say that other people around them are experiencing an emotion when they're the person that's actually experiencing it. Wave your hand if you've ever had that experience of someone saying, hey, you seem angry, and you know you're not angry. It's the other person projecting their emotion on you. Another thing is they sometimes will, and this is where they live in denial. It's like complete denial of what's going on in the world. It's their own reality because they don't want to even deal with the emotion. So unhealed trauma is usually a result of you repressing or suppressing your emotions. So that's why it can sneak up on us and make us think it's our intuition, but it's not. It is that unhealed part of ourselves for not letting those emotions come through to us. So how do you tell the difference? If you make a decision and after you make that decision, you feel anxiety, anger, frustration, you feel a grief in your spirit, that's usually an example that you are operating out of unhealed trauma. When you feel those particular emotions, we all have had the experience where we think we've healed from someone. They send us a text messages, maybe it's a hello, how you doing? And then all of a sudden, you then have a reaction in your stomach where you feel nervous, you feel upset, and the person has done nothing to you. That's an example, and you're unable to say hello back to the person. That is an example of you allowing that unhealed trauma to guide your interaction. And the key thing with unhealed trauma is to process the emotions that are around it. Our default nature of our intuition is to bring us love, peace, and joy. That's the default nature, because your intuition is your spirit part of yourself. It is to bring you in alignment with those things. So anytime you're feeling that anxiety, that frustration, that depression, that bitterness, you are operating out of fear and doubt. You're operating outside of being aligned to your soul. So how do you move past the fear? Right? That's the thing most people want to know. How do I move past the fear? You move past the fear by actually processing the emotions that are behind it. If you think about a fear of rejection. So one of the things I talked about earlier is that part of the reason why we don't trust our intuition, and we ask ourselves why multiple times, is that we fear rejection. We fear walking into the reality that maybe I actually may be right about this situation or this person. When we trust our intuition and we listen to it and we walk away from the relationship or we walk away from the person, the initial part of that rejection hurts. It stings, right? But if you think about long term, after that wears off, oftentimes you are off better than you were before. You are feeling a lot better. Your life is going down the right pathway because you have trusted your intuition and you have left that situation. And so I always say this: if we know that all things work together for our good, that no matter what happens, they're going to align and work together for our good, then if we trust our intuition when it tells us to move left and move right, then even if we feel a little bit of rejection because we're walking away from a situation, we know that that is going to be okay in the long run, because our creator, the universe, is always going to provide us what we need. And so if I am losing X in this situation, it is going to be replaced with something better. At the heart of all of this, of trusting your voice and trusting your intuition, is about being present. Most of us are on autopilot in this world. We are not paying attention to what's going on around us. We're just moving and we're conforming to what's going on in the world. In order for you to truly trust yourself, you have to be able to pause and understand how your voice is being filtered. Is it going out of love and trust, which is sending those positive emotions, or is it going out of fear and doubt? If it's going out of fear and doubt, then you need to ask yourself, what are you fearing in that particular moment? And you start to process that fear, deconstruct the fear. If you're feeling trust, ask yourself, what am I trusting about this situation is going to work out? What am I believing is going to be okay in this particular situation? And that's how you will know if you're operating out of love and trust and fear and doubt. My goal is to get us to a world where most of us operate out of love and trust versus operating out of fear and doubt. So I got a few questions that I'm going to look down and read, and then I'll open it up for your questions. So a question I got was, what about people who hurt you? Wouldn't you naturally feel fear and doubt when you're interacting with that person? Isn't that a natural occurrence because they've done some hurt to you? And, naturally our default, let me be clear, our default working of our intuition is from our spirit nature. Our spirit nature does not have fear and doubt a part of it. It is not a part of it. So by nature, naturally, we want to experience peace and clarity in our lives out the gate. Now, when we're conforming to the world and the world standards, yes, we're going to feel fear and doubt. And what's often at the heart of when you're interacting with someone who's hurt you in the past, we realize that the core of getting over that is to operate out of love, which means that if we are still feeling doubt in that particular relationship, that means that we haven't fully moved on to a place where we have forgiven the person. And forgiveness is hard. It is very hard to do. But one thing I always do to check myself is that when I'm interacting with someone who's hurt me, most of the time the hurt has happened in the past, or I'm envisioning in the future the type of hurt that they're going to do to me. Unless they've just hurt me in the moment, in the present, which that's rare. Most of the time it's the future or the past. We are essentially putting that person in a prison of them not being able to change. And the reality is that sometimes it comes a point in our life where we have to separate in relationships. You know, there comes a point in our life where people grow apart. And a part of why we can't, let go sometimes is that because we form attachments to people. And the best way to be in this world is not having an attachment to a person or an outcome, because you don't know how things are going to unfold. And so it may be that person that hurt you, it's this time in the season for you all to separate and heal independently. And when you separate and you heal, you have that trust. Again, love and trust. You have trust that if it's meant to be for you to be in communion with this person again, that the universe will align itself and they will come back into your life and you all will be able to engage each other from two healed perspectives. I believe everyone we meet in life is our teacher. They're teaching us something. The people who get on our nerves the most are mirrors to areas of our own soul where we still need to heal. And sometimes we heal together, sometimes we heal separately. Of course, if you're in an abusive situation, it is not okay to stay in an abusive situation. The reality is that's time for you to separate from that particular person, because you're trusting that if it's meant to be for you and that person to walk together, that they will grow, they will heal, they will change their patterns, and you all will be brought back together. To stick with someone in an abusive situation or abusive dynamic is an example of being in a situation with someone out of fear and doubt versus love and trust. The second question I got was, what about love and how does that show up? So how does love and trust show up? When you're operating in love, it's a mindset, it's in your heart, and it shows up in the way that you interact with people. And love is not conditional. True love is not conditional, and true love doesn't have fear. So if you are considering yourself walking in love or walking in relationship with a person and you said there's love there, but if fear exists, then that true love has not been made visible in that particular relationship. And the only way we can really operate in love is to be unconditional with our love. This is what every spiritual teaching, the Bible, the Quran, every new age book, everything says, that love has to be unconditional. That means no matter what, we still love the person. Sometimes we love them at a distance, but love with conditions, which is how we operate as humans. You do this for me, I do that for you. That shows me that you love me. That type of love is going to be a surefire to have you attached to fear and doubt, because the reality is a person's going to do something to upset you. And when you look at love from an unconditional point, you look at people through the lens of grace, that we are all on our learning journeys together. And because we're on our learning journeys, my journey is no better than your journey. And we might be at different places. And sometimes the universe aligns where we walk together. Sometimes it aligns where we separate from one another. And the key to love is operating in forgiveness, which is recognizing our limitations and that nobody is perfect. And I'll take the last question that I got via DM, which was, how do I move past fear-based thinking? This is a real experience for most people, and I'm really proud of the person who submitted this, because they're owning the fact that they are operating from a fear-based thinking lens. So the first thing you can do, I talked about this in the blog, is to do 5 whys. Ask yourself why. By the time you get to the 5th why, you have the root of why you are operating in a fear-based mindset. Then you begin to deconstruct that fear. And it's called releasing that fear. Can I live without X? Whatever it is, your fear. If you're fearing rejection, can I live, without this job? And then again, you begin to, you can live without your job. It might be difficult, it might be challenging, but you can live without the job. Another question you can ask yourself is, where is this fear coming from? Is it coming from unhealed trauma? Is it coming from my childhood? And then process where it is coming from, right? To untangle it, so you're not walking around on automatic, living your life through this particular fear lens. The next thing you do is ask yourself, how long will I pay the cost to hold on to this fear? How long will I pay the cost to hold on to this fear? That's a great question for you to ask yourself when you're in fear. You know, for example, if you have a fear of starting a new job and you know your current work conditions are not that great, you ask yourself, how long am I willing to pay the cost to hold on to this particular fear? There are several other techniques that I use in one-on-one coaching. I also share some of those techniques in the blogs. I try to leave at least one tool that you can use from the blogs. And right now, open it up. If you have a question about trusting your voice, about trusting your intuition, or how do you discern between unhealed past traumas and your intuition, you can just type your questions in the chat box. So we're at the part that if you have any questions about trusting your intuition, trusting your voice, just type them in the chat box. I've finished my spoken part of this particular section. The last thing I want to do is to encourage you to keep following on social media. So I will be posting my 1-minute audiograms, which will be additional information on how do you start to trust your voice. I'll also continue to drop the blog, which is every Wednesday at 12 noon on the Be Free Woman's website. You can link that website in my profile, BeFreeWoman.com. I also sometimes will copy and paste the blogs on Instagram so that people can read them. Thank you so much for tuning into this live and allowing me, oops, I almost missed you. Okay, I'm wondering about the moment when I have hesitation. How do I overcome my moment of hesitation when I know I should trust my voice, but I can't make the leap? So, well, number one, when you are having that moment of hesitation, you know right in there, that's the sign that whatever it is you're hesitating to do, it's pulling you away from your intuition. So are you hesitating? Give me an example of the hesitation. Oh, there she goes, she's back. So when you have this moment of hesitation, are you hesitating because you need to make a decision that requires you to walk into an area that's going to make you uncomfortable? Or are you hesitating when you know you should be doing the right thing? Because part of the reason you are hesitating, part of the reason why you're having that angst inside of yourself is because fear and doubt is tugging at you. Got it. Thank you so much for the clarity. So I actually talked about this a little bit earlier, Anita. So what happens is that when you are hesitating, that's fear and doubt pulling at you. That fear and doubt is saying, don't say that. This person is going to reject you. You could be wrong. It's basically saying all these automatic negative, what I like to call them ants, automatic negative thoughts are going off in your head, which is why it's pulling you to fear and doubt. And not trusting that if I say this, all things are going to work out the way it's supposed to work out. When you are not speaking up to protect somebody's feelings, and you're speaking out of purity of your heart, and I want to be clear here, if you're speaking up to be mean, which I don't believe that to be who you are, when you're speaking up to be mean, your intuition is also going to tell you don't do that because you're not being nice. But when you're speaking out of a purity to talk about an injustice, that requires bravery. That requires courage. That requires that I am trusting the information that I need to put out to this world is important. It is going to be something that this person sitting across from me needs to hear. And I'm going to trust that by putting that out there, whatever is supposed to happen is supposed to happen. So if they get upset at me, they're supposed to have their learning moment through that. If I'm supposed to learn how to deliver a message in a way that people can digest it, I'm going to learn that. But it is trusting that you, in that moment, are moving how you're supposed to move and that the universe is going to work everything out. So if it's meant for you to walk in community with this person, if it's meant for you to still have a friendship or working relationship, the universe is going to work it out for that relationship to still be there, whether or not you say that or not. But if you don't say it, then you're operating out of the fact that it's operating out what I was saying, like a mindset of lack and poverty versus abundance. And if you lose this relationship, which would be unfortunate just for you speaking up, that means that you and that person might have to separate for this season. They're on their own learning journey. You're on your own learning journey. And if it's meant to be for you all to be in communion with one another, then you will be brought back to one another. Was that helpful? Was that helpful for you? Great. Well, do you have any other questions? You have me to yourself right now before I hop off. I only wanted to go for 20 minutes. I'm so excited to be talking about this topic of trusting your voice, because it's something that we don't talk about personally, but it's something that we all struggle with and we all deal with. So this is gonna be saved on my live. Feel free to tag your friends, tell them to check it out. I'm gonna see if I can post it on my Instagram stories, the Instagram IGTV as well. Wow, that's amazing. That's awesome. I'm glad people are actually talking about it. That's great. That's really refreshing for me to hear. Well, you have a fantastic Wednesday night. Thank you for tuning in to this free live session. Have a great night.